morning and welcome to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council Town Hall. I'm Kim McCleary, President and CEO, and it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all to today's program. Please stay tuned to the end of today's program for a quick update on all of our upcoming programs. It is now my great pleasure to introduce today's program, a conversation with U.S. Senator Todd Young, who is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Today's program will be moderated by Pete Peterson, who is Dean of Pepperdine University School of Public Policy. For those of you who would like to ask questions of the Senator or Dean Peterson, there's a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen where you can type in your questions. And Jessica DeGanzik, our Vice President of Events, will be managing your questions during the Q&A portion of today's program. Pete, Senator Young, we're so pleased that with your time. Let me turn this over to you, Pete, and get this started. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Kim. It is great to be with you all and the good folks at the LA World Affairs Council and Town Hall for this important conversation about federal policy and its intersection with technology and also foreign policy as well in a region of the world that is very important, I know, to the members of the LA World Affairs Council and Town Hall. I am Pete Peterson, the very grateful Dean of Pepperdine's Graduate School of Public Policy, and it's an honor to be joined by Senator Todd Young from the great state of Indiana. Todd brings a rather unique cross-sector background, graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy and military service. He was a three-time congressional member in the House of Representatives from the 9th District of Indiana. And in 2016, he was elected to the U.S. Senate to represent Indiana. I want to get immediately into the conversation, but Senator Young, a pleasure to welcome you here.
Pete, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to the World Affairs Council.
I thought I'd break up our conversation into three segments. One is first to begin with the personal, then to get into the policy, and then to conclude with the political, because you are co-sponsoring a rather unique and important piece of legislation in what was initially titled the Endless Frontiers Act, now titled the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. But let's begin with a personal. You are co-sponsoring this piece of legislation with the leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer from New York. Tell us a little bit about your interest in this area of public policy and why you find yourself co-sponsoring this with Senator Schumer.
Well, thank you, Pete. You know, my interest in global affairs really extends all the way back into my time in high school. I'll quickly run you through that. So that led me to join the U.S. Navy when I graduated from high school, and ultimately I was able to get admission into the United States Naval Academy and land a commission in the U.S. Marine Corps. When you are immersed in an academic atmosphere that's training you to be a leader of men and women to implement foreign policy, that tends to get one more interested in global affairs and military affairs and other related issues. So it was during my time in the military really where I became interested in these sorts of issues. My first job, real job, so to speak, after leaving the military was service on the staff of my home state senator, Dick Lugar, who was at the time chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I worked on trade issues and energy policy for the senator, and I did that following some studying of economics at the University of Chicago and landing my business degree. So the convergence of foreign policy on one hand and economic policy on the other is something that I've long been interested in. So as I landed a seat in the U.S. House and later have found myself serving in the Senate, I've tried to look for opportunities to shape our geopolitical position, our geostrategic position, through economic measures. I don't think that over the years there's been enough attention to that from members of Congress. Some would argue we've over-militarized our foreign policy and been less attentive to the asymmetric things we can do through economic instruments of power. So trade policy is of real interest to me, international taxation, and investing in R&D. These are all among the things that I've been working on as a member of the U.S. Senate. I met Senator Schumer, really got to know him personally in the gym. We work out in the same fitness facility in the morning. So, you know, he's on his recumbent bike with a flip phone, and between exercises, we discover we have a joint interest in our policy as it relates to China. He too is concerned about the predatory behavior of the Chinese Communist Party, the theft of intellectual property, the harnessing of slave labor, the anti-competitive behavior of its state-owned enterprises, and other things.
Yep.
So those conversations and other influences led me to draft some legislation back during the Trump administration to ensure we had a clear, more defined national economic security strategy, just as we have a clear and regularly published military strategy, national defense strategy. And so that has found its way into legislation I've worked on with Senator Schumer to ensure that the U.S. remains on the cutting edge of technological leadership at a time when China is investing heavily in this area. And our intention is to ensure that we don't fall behind, that we actually lead the world in some of these areas of cutting edge investment for both economic and national security reasons.
You know, that's a great start and a perfect segue into the policy itself. Again, this I want to talk about here the actual piece of legislation that you and Senator Schumer are leading on. This is now a 1,400-page bill. And so there's a lot of moving parts here. I want to leave the political conversation to my next question. But for this one, this has been called the largest piece of industrial policy legislation in decades. And as you say, this isn't simply seen through the lens of supporting the technology R&D industries here in the United States, but it's also being done with a window toward what it means internationally, with, in particular, the impact of China. So tell us a little bit about the piece of legislation and what are the kinds of technology that this is ostensibly meant to support. I know it takes in everything from AI to 5G, but tell us a little bit about the legislation itself as it stands.
Sure. Well, the legislation is informed by our own economic history, where the United States post-World War II stood up a peacetime defense enterprise. It was Vannevar Bush, who was FDR's science advisor, who really authored a landmark piece of scholarship called Science: The Endless Frontier. And he issued a report to FDR after writing that compellingly titled piece, recommending that FDR and his administration and the United States make investments in areas not just of basic research, but also applied research that could improve the lives of Americans, make us more materially wealthy, allow us to develop new product lines based on the applied research we had, and a lot of this research would also have direct national security applications. Well, over the years, our land grant universities have done some incredible landmark research, as have our Department of Energy labs, that have indeed benefited the American people. These are pre-market investments that would not otherwise be funded by venture capitalists because of the weight of investment required to get breakthrough developments in these areas, and because of the payoff period. Typically, your venture capitalists are looking for at least a 10-year payoff before they get their money back. This is a longer horizon investment that we're looking at. So working with the likes of Eric Schmidt, who led a national defense panel on artificial intelligence, Keith Kroc, who was the Undersecretary of Economic Affairs during the Trump administration, and a number of technologists, national security experts, and business leaders. Senator Schumer and I, working with successive White Houses, determined that there were some pretty identifiable technology areas that were going to help shape the landscape of our 21st century geopolitics and economics. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, robotics, autonomous vehicles, battery storage. One could make a strategic bet, as we have, that these are going to be important areas for the hypersonics, for the United States to develop technology that would not otherwise be funded. Now, there are spillover benefits, back to the industrial policy reference you mentioned here. There are benefits collectively that all of us would enjoy that an individual investor, of course, would not enjoy through these investments, just as there are benefits that we all enjoy from building an aircraft carrier that a private investor would not enjoy. So we propose creating a new tech directorate at the National Science Foundation that focuses not on curiosity-driven research, which there's a place for that at our universities, but instead on outcome-based research, on solving discrete problems and working on discrete areas of technology that can then be utilized by venture capitalists to spin off new businesses around the country. And we would work with partners and allies in development of these technologies. So crowd in both talent and treasure from all of those strong allies that share our values. One thinks of Japan and Israel and others. So we would jointly develop this technology so that we could have joint standards that are consistent with our shared, what you might call Western or sort of values. We don't want biases against particular people based on race and ethnicity. The Chinese would differ when it came to artificial intelligence algorithm development. We don't want technologies that would be developed and spy on our own citizens. So there'd be different privacy thresholds that we would have to work together with them on, as opposed to allowing the Chinese to develop their own standards that will then be adopted by so much of both the developed and the developing world. So we call for a significant increase in the weight of federal investment in the physical sciences, these areas of applied research. And we also call for the establishment of tech hub designations around the country so that, state of Indiana, we have a lot of expertise, for example, in the area of advanced manufacturing. We're the most manufacturing intensive state in the country. It's conceivable that Indiana would be designated a tech hub in light of that expertise and utilize our land grant universities to focus specifically on those areas. And we do that in each of the defined tech areas so that we might provide the seed capital to establish the next Silicon Valley, the next Boston, the next research triangle in North Carolina, and ensure that America, as we head more deeply into the 21st century, is firing on all cylinders. And we're utilizing all our talent to outgrow, out-innovate, and out-compete the Chinese Communist Party.
I want to get into that aspect of it because it is interesting how the title of this legislation has changed from the Endless Frontiers Act into this U.S. Innovation and Competition Act. The word competition is there. And as you've just explained, we have a particular competitor that we are considering here. And so unlike other pieces of what you might call economic development funding, there is a particular international relations foreign policy component to this. And you mentioned that in your first answer about your interest in not simply finding military solutions to foreign policy issues. Tell us a little bit about that nexus between investments in technology and industries which are not military investments, but how they can be seen as part of a broader foreign policy strategy.
So the Endless Frontier Act, which is the portion of U.S. Innovation and Competition Act that is not subsidizing chip fabrication in the United States, right? Collectively, the Endless Frontier Act was everything I just described. And then we have the chip fabrication component that we certainly could touch on that's been well covered in the news media, right? But what the objective of the legislation here is to ensure that our national innovation continues to drive our national power. This has been the case really for hundreds of years. If you go back, Paul Kennedy wrote a landmark book. I think it was back when I was at the Naval Academy. The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, and in that book back in the 1990s, Paul Kennedy made the argument, looking back on historical examples, that it was really technological innovation and rates of economic growth that drove military power and the powers of countries. And to the extent countries could not keep up in terms of the innovation and economic growth, they weren't able to sustain their value system, their way of life. And so essentially that's the lens through which Senator Schumer and I and roughly 70 other U.S. senators who voted for this legislation and passed it over to the House are seeing this challenge. This is not, let me emphasize, this is not industrial policy in the sense that we're not subsidizing particular businesses. We're really not even subsidizing particular sectors of the economy. We're subsidizing discrete technology areas that may at some point become new sectors of the economy, just as the aerospace industry became a new sector of the economy that spins off, trillions of dollars of value to the world every year. And that began with heavy federal investment. There are other examples like that. But the idea here is to use that growth, to use that innovative power in concert with our allies, to ensure that we outgrow and outcompete the Chinese, that we have a dominance in the next frontier of military technology, areas like hypersonics, where the Chinese Communist Party, it appears, has already outflanked us, in areas like artificial intelligence, where it also appears we may be behind the Chinese Communist Party. So we don't need to compete just with China. In fact, that would be a short-sighted approach. Instead, why don't we harness what is arguably our greatest geopolitical advantage, which is our alliance system, to collectively bring to bear the economic and diplomatic and creative weight of all Western nations to develop these technologies and ensure that this is the second American century. And by that, I mean the second century where the universal values on which our country was founded prevail. The rules-based international order that we established is respected and recognized so that others might flourish like we do. So with that, I'm happy to answer more questions or elaborate on any particular points that I touched on, Pete.
Well, let's get to the politics just finally. Yeah. And again, I just want to follow up on Jessica's note there in the chat feature. We are going to get to your questions here in just a few minutes, and we certainly welcome those to be typed into the chat feature. The final thing I wanted to touch on is the political. As you said, well over 70 senators voted in support of this at a time when we are being told that this is one of the most polarized eras in political life here in the United States. You're working across the aisle with Senator Schumer. You've seen a significant number of both Democrat and Republican senators come together in support of this. At the same time, there are those who are critiquing it. I'm reading a tweet here, which is always a great source of information, from Senator Sanders of Vermont, who said, Congress should work to expand U.S. microchip production. No, as part of the Endless Frontiers bill, we should not be handing out $53 billion in corporate welfare to some of the largest and most profitable corporations in the country with no strings attached, he said. And then on the right, you have libertarian organizations like the Cato Institute, which have also come out against this. So I suppose in some ways it's a good sign that you have attacks from both the left and right, with understanding you've got a significant group of senators in support of this. But as it moves into the House, tell us a little bit about the politics of this.
Sure. Well, let me address those two, those polar sort of arguments, because you know, the arguments of the Cato Institute, which does a lot of good scholarship. I actually I'm grateful for a lot of their work, and Senator Sanders' argument has a certain appeal to a cohort of individuals to whom I'd like to speak briefly. But so in response to the libertarian argument that the market will just take care of this, right? Well, I mean, there are returns on many of our public investments that would not directly benefit a private level investor, and I've sort of explained the spillover benefits. This is why we do basic research. It's the same reason you do applied research. And it's also a reason why we do research in the area of military sciences, right? I mean, we don't see the government relying on the market to fund our military needs. And essentially, technology, cyberspace is a new domain of competition in the world. I think that libertarian argument, frankly, is a superficial one. I'd be surprised if all of the scholars over at Cato agreed with that. But you know, look, I certainly want to be responsive to it. I guess the last real-world illustration of the fact that it's just completely wrong and off kilter is the National Venture Capital Association has made this a top priority. Now, why would the venture capitalists be behind this if it crowded out their investment opportunities, right? So they're supported because it's a pre-market investment, and they understand that actually after these fundamental discoveries and breakthroughs occur, that then will give them an opportunity to invest in spin-off enterprises and so forth. And that's a good thing. It's a really good thing. It'll benefit the American people. In terms of Senator Sanders' argument, also has a certain superficial appeal to it, a populist appeal, if you will. But the counterpoint is quite simple. You have South Korea and some European countries which want to incentivize chip fabrication in their own countries. So in order to compete with that, we need to offer some incentives for national security purposes. We should have some measure of independence. We should not be 100% dependent on other countries for higher value added, more sophisticated chips that go into our weapon systems, go into our automobiles, so on and so forth, are needed to run our economy. Right now, we're seeing the challenges associated with disruptions in that chip fabrication supply chain. That's rippling throughout our entire economy. So we need an insurance policy against that. That's a response to Senator Sanders, and enough on that. So the broader question was, I think I've, in batting down the two polls,
Yeah.
you're asking me about the politics more generally.
Yeah, and how it moves to the House from here, and you're
Sure.
thinking about the current status of the
So
legislature.
this bill has two value propositions, both of which are really popular. All right, we've experienced the convergence of urbanization, globalization on steroids, and a fourth industrial revolution, as some have characterized it, that have really disrupted the lives of a number of Americans through the gales of creative destruction, right? Some people have found their skills much less valued in this knowledge economy. Others feel as though they've joined a class of useless people. And if we are going to win the 21st century and remain a Republican form of government, small r, in which we're one nation and everyone feels like they can be equal participants, well, then they need to feel like they're meaningfully participating in both our economic and our civic life. And so our aim here is to ensure that we are harnessing the talent through investments in these technologies across the heartland, in addition to in our coastal urban areas, and in investing in the educational areas required so that people can operate this technology, develop this technology, and so forth, which the USICA does. And so that's incredibly popular, making sure that everyone has an opportunity to land a 21st century job. We have been able to join that imperative with ensuring that our values win over the Chinese Communist parties. And so this is an incredibly, for rank and file Americans, setting aside a Cato libertarian and a Sanders Democratic Socialist, this is a very popular piece of popular initiative. So that's why it received 70 votes coming out of the Senate. The hang up in the House of Representatives, they have broken this large bill, USICA, into 6 smaller component parts. And 3 of the 6, those pertaining to innovation, have actually passed out. The other 3 relate more to foreign affairs and foreign policy provisions. So there are just some principal disagreements between House Democrats and House and our Republican and Democratic senators about how those provisions should read. There are also some principal disagreements between House Democrats, particularly on their progressive caucus, and those of us who supported this in the Senate, on whether our scientific enterprise should be primarily focused on developing technologies that address national security challenges, as I and Senator Schumer believe, or if instead we should be working on technology to address our social challenges. Our view in the Senate is that there's a lot of money going out the door to address social challenges, and even on the back end of that money going out the door, we're still going to have our share of social challenges. This bill should be focused on the national security threat that is presented by the Chinese Communist Party. So we're working to reconcile the different visions right now. It seems to be moving more towards the Senate version and vision. And I anticipate passage of this legislation before year's end. There's a good possibility it could be an amendment attached to the National Defense Authorization Act, which passes annually out of the House and the Senate without a whole lot of difficulty. Alternatively, it could be considered as a standalone bill before year's end.
Well, that's very comprehensive. I want to bring in Jessica here with any questions we might have from our audience.
So thank you so much, Dean Peterson. Senator Young, thank you. Our first question, is the funding for this possible with the huge cost of the stimulus bills?
Well, look, this is an investment that we believe is going to pay off handsomely down the road. And you know, Ronald Reagan's adage, which was it related directly to the Pentagon's budget. Someone asked him how much we should spend for national defense, and he said, well, let's first figure out what's needed to keep the American people safe and secure, then let's spend it. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? So we shouldn't be sparing on areas that are required to defend our values and to defend our way of life. But unlike, you know, strictly defense spending, as I've mentioned several times here, these technology areas have an opportunity, if we can lead the way in their development, have an opportunity to increase our rate of GDP, to increase our material prosperity, and to lead to more revenue coming into the federal government. I mean, neither Republicans nor Democrats should ever adopt a view that, you know, all public expenditures are unwise. There are some public expenditures in education and core infrastructure and research, for example, and national defense that in public health that are necessary to allow us to grow at a more rapid rate. I am a conservative, traditionally understood. Conservatives believe in institutions, and among those institutions are properly scoped governments.
Thank you. Are universities in rural or farming regions engaged on upping their tech and computer engineering majors to meet the needs for their students and future employers, even if those jobs aren't in their regions yet?
I'm not sure. I had somebody slamming a door in my background, so I'm sorry. It's the era of Zoom, which is magnificent in many ways, but you asked if universities and colleges.
Yeah, so are universities in rural and farming regions engaged in upping their tech and computer engineering majors to meet those needs for their students, even if those jobs aren't in their regions yet?
Well, one of the components of the Endless Frontier Act is ensuring that all the way from the associates level up through postdoctorate level, we have requisite expertise in this country to work on the new technologies, to study new technologies, to at the doctorate and postdoctorate level to come up with breakthroughs in each of these defined technology areas. So one of the purposes here is to ensure that we do have the expertise. Now, the question about in one's geographic area, will those talents be needed in particular geographic areas? We try and democratize geographically economic opportunity and the ability to participate in this competition vis-a-vis the Chinese Communist Party through the establishment of tech hubs and by ensuring that land-grant universities around the country, in addition to our DOE labs, receive increases in funding in the area of applied research. So there will be plenty more opportunities across America, again, not just confined to a few pockets of economic growth.
Thank you. It sounds like Chuck Schumer is a friend across the aisle that you can work with. What other Democrats can you work with, and why can't more members of Congress do that?
This is the first case where I've worked with Senator Schumer. I hope there will be other opportunities to work with Senator Schumer. I've worked with many others, so it's almost too many to count, but Senator Hassan and Chris Coons of Delaware and Chris Murphy of Connecticut, and just on and on. So I've never really had trouble working with people on the other side of the aisle. The way I view my job is to stand on principle and to make principled arguments. And if I can't come to terms with my colleagues on particular issues, try and win the argument. And then, as Margaret Thatcher once said in a different context, then you win the vote. But we shouldn't let our principled disagreements obscure our many common interests and areas of agreement. And historically, at least, making some targeted investments in areas like research and education and national security have not been really controversial. So rather than spending the vast majority of time on narrow areas of disagreement, I try and find areas where I can actually get things done in areas of agreement. And you know what, as you look at the entire canvas of public policy, though there's a lot of reporting about areas of disagreement, there still remains quite a bit of area of policy agreement between center-right Republicans and center-left Democrats, even some conservatives and progressives. And so I just spend a lot more time on that sort of work, which incidentally is a good fit for my constituency. The state of Indiana is on balance a Republican state. It is a conservative state, but it's a pragmatic state. People want me to get things done and not just be a sort of a rhetorician, just give speeches. They want me to at least iteratively improve public policy. It's a tough time. It's a tough time for a lot of reasons politically. Some of it has to do with those forces I mentioned earlier, those impersonal foreign forces that have robbed a lot of people of the agency they have in their lives, the self-control they have over their lives, globalization, urbanization, the fourth, industrial revolution. These aren't bad forces. In fact, they make us wealthier in the end. But change has to be somewhat managed, or we're going to leave people behind, and they will turn against the system. And so our job is to, during this difficult time, provide solutions. Otherwise, folks will lose faith in their institutions, including government. And frankly, that has happened in recent years. People are angry. In the absence of demonstrable results and leadership, people are turning to false prophets on the left and the right. And that is compelling to the media. The media loves to reward what I would characterize as oftentimes unconstructive behavior by our public figures. And so that is my Reader's Digest diagnosis to answer the question there of why it's so hard to work with one another.
Thank you. Do you see state and local incentives for research and development as a complement to Senate Bill 1260, which is the Innovation and Competition Act of 2021? And if so, what do you see as the ideal form that those incentives might take? For example, business tax credits, small and medium enterprise grants and loan programs, et cetera.
Well, look, I'll let the state and local and regional governments assess what makes the most sense for them. Frankly, there's a bit of a competitive advantage to the state of Indiana when it comes to these sorts of things. We are a very well governed state. And when it comes time for the Tech Hub designation, we're going to put in some incredibly strong applications in a number of different technology areas, and we will land one, I'm confident. One of the reasons we'll land one is we've done such a good job of managing our finances and our government, we'll probably come up with some nice incentives to add to the federal investments that will further enhance the package. So I'm trying to, I wish I could avoid punting on that question, but I try not to steer into the state and local lane, or I get some folks back home who have those jobs who might get upset with me.
Thank you.
Jessica, can I
government,
just jump in on that one?
yeah,
'Cause
go
I
ahead.
think it may be of interest just to some of the viewers here. Tell us again, Senator, about how many of these hubs there will be and the process. You just said this is actually going to be an application process.
That's right.
It's not going to be designated in this legislation. So tell us about how that process is going to work.
Well, we've outlined some factors, but we have not prescriptively told the Department of Commerce, which will accept the applications, how they should run the competition. But think of it as an HQ2 Amazon competition that's not rigged, okay? Think of it in those terms. So there will be a fair-minded evaluation of different applications, but here's some of the things that need to that a state or a region or a locality would have to be designated a national tech hub, and therefore attract more public investment, which would bring more venture capital and private investment into an area and serve as a conduit for the training of the next generation of technologists and postdocs in those areas. So you need to have existing industry expertise in a particular area. You need to have some expertise, probably world-class expertise at your university level, existing expertise, right? You need to have a workforce that is capable of working in some of these different areas. You need to have an interested state, one that has demonstrated that it's not only interested in developing a particular type of technology, but multidisciplinary in nature, government, private sector, philanthropic or not-for-profit sector, all unified in their effort to attract the talent. So those are among the things. There are some other pillars or factors that are looked at through the applicants, but the short answer to the question is we're not real prescriptive. That would come through a rule made by the Department of Commerce.
Thank you. Well, I know you have to run down to the floor to cast a vote. So if you have any resources or links or direction you can give to our viewers in terms of how they can learn more about this act and also about the guidelines for applying, if you can go ahead and share that now, and then we'll hop off of here.
Well, I would recommend that if people want to learn, if viewers want to learn more about this legislation, they can certainly visit my website at young.senate.gov, young.senate.gov, and they'll find some information there. And we also have an opportunity to contact our office. The information is located on the website, and we can provide anyone who's interested more information about those factors that we look at so that states or regions can apply for the tech hub designation. But I would emphasize, even for those states that won't land one of 18, up to 18 tech hubs across the country, there will still be a very substantial increase in investment in applied research that would flow through our land-grant colleges and other major universities, leading to more startups across the heartland and benefiting rank-and-file Americans who at the same time are working on technologies that will help us outgrow, out-innovate, out-compete the Chinese Communist Party. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator Young.
I think in the background, it's time I go down to vote, and I'm just grateful for this opportunity to address all of you about this mammoth bill that is incredibly consequential but multifaceted, and I hope there's some measure of clarity I was able to bring to it.
Definitely.
Thanks,
thank you so much, Senator Young. Pete and Kim, I'll turn this back over to you.
Well, again, it's been a pleasure to be a part of this important conversation at the intersection of technology, domestic policy, and foreign policy. And once again, the LA World Affairs Council and Town Hall is convening just great and pivotal speakers on these issues. So been an honor to, again, be a part of this conversation, and look forward to the next. And Kim, I'll send it back over to you.
Thank you, Dean Peterson. We so enjoy when you moderate our programs. This was absolutely terrific. So thank you so much for your time.
Great to be with you.
For our viewers, just a quick update on our upcoming programs. On November 1st, we have China's Civilian Army, the Making of Wolf Warrior Diplomacy. And on November 10th, Ambassador Nina Hachigian, who is the Deputy Mayor of Los Angeles's International Relations Department. Of course, every Tuesday at 5 p.m., politics in the time of coronavirus. I'd like to also extend a big thank you to our board member, Beth Lowe, who made today's program possible with Senator Young. So please go to our website, register today, become a member, make a donation, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.